Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news, interviews and fun for the WordPress community. Now, welcome your host, Nathan Wrigley. Hello there and welcome once again to the WP Builds podcast. You've reached episode number 440, entitled Comparing WordPress Page Builder Accessibility, In-Depth Insights from Amber Hinds. It was published on Thursday, the 9th of October, 2025. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and before we join Amber for that chat, a few bits of housekeeping. The first thing to say is that Black Friday is around the corner. If you are interested in finding one source for all of your WordPress Black Friday needs, we have it for you. It's a page at wpbuilds.com/black. I recommend that you bookmark it, wpbuilds.com/black. As the days and weeks go by in the run-up to Black Friday, we will be adding more and more deals. If you have a product or service in the WordPress space, there is a button on that page called Add a Deal. Click on that button, fill out the form, and we will make sure that your deal, if it is in fact suitable, is added to that page so that you've got your thing in front of our WordPress audience. That page does get a lot of clicks and a lot of visits in the run-up to Black Friday. You will notice if you go there that there are some sponsored slots at the top. If you would like to sponsor that page and get yourself pride of place on that page, well, go and click on the buttons inside the sponsor area and we will get you on that page as soon as we can. The other thing to mention is that if you like what we do, head to wpbuilds.com/subscribe. You'll find all of the places where we post all of our content. The best thing to do, though, would be subscribe to our newsletter. That will get you 2 emails a week, one when we publish this, the Thursday podcast, but also when we've repackaged our This Week in WordPress show on a Monday. We'll send you an email about that as well. Speaking of that, 2 p.m. UK time every Monday. This Week in WordPress is a show which we do live. You can find it at wpbuilds.com/live. Come and give us some comments. We love it when people do that. The last thing to mention is that if you would like to sponsor this podcast and be inserted into the audio, a bit like 3 companies that you're going to hear of in a moment, head to wpbuilds.com/advertise to find out more. I can more or less guarantee that the investment will be worth it. We have a very large WordPress specific audience and it will get your product noticed in a very competitive landscape. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by GoDaddy Pro. GoDaddy Pro, the home of managed WordPress hosting that includes free domain, SSL, and 24/7 support. Bundle that with The Hub by GoDaddy Pro to unlock more free benefits to manage multiple sites in one place. Invoice clients and get 30% off new purchases. Find out more at go.me/WP Builds. We're also helped out by Bluehost. Bluehost, redefine your web hosting experience with Bluehost Cloud. Managed WordPress hosting that comes with lightning-fast websites, 100% network uptime, and 24/7 priority support. With Bluehost Cloud, the possibilities are out of this world. Experience it today at bluehost.com/cloud. We're also joined by Omnisend. Omnisend, do you sell your stuff online? Then meet Omnisend. Yes, that Omnisend. The email and SMS tool that helped you make $73 for every dollar spent. The one that's so good, it's almost boring. Hate the excitement of roller coaster sales? Prefer a steady line going up? Try Omnisend today at omnisend.com. And we do thank GoDaddy Pro, Bluehost and Omnisend for their support of the WP Builds podcast. Like I said, if like them you would like to be featured on the podcast, head to wpbuilds.com/advertise to find out more. Okay, what have we got for you today? Well, I have Amber Hinds. Amber is the CEO of Equalize Digital. She is heavily involved in the WordPress accessibility space, and today we feature some really in-depth research that Amber has done into WordPress page builders. There are 19 page builders plus Gutenberg, which she inspects at a very granular level. She tells us all about how the project got started and how it ran last year, improvements that they've made to the project, the way the project is structured, which page builders did they choose, and which aspects of those page builders did they decide to investigate, how the research was done, how the scoring system works, how it tries to be as impartial as possible, and of course, the bit that you're most interested in, which page builder turned out to be the most accessible. That is all coming up next, and I hope that you enjoy it. I am joined on the podcast by Amber Hinds. Hello, Amber.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Thank you. Nice to have you with us. We're firmly in the grip of accessibility on this podcast because, well, I'll get Amber to do her potted bio in a moment, but we're going to be talking about a really long, detailed, and utterly thorough survey. Well, not survey, I guess. What is the right word for it, Amber? What's it called?
Research project.
Let's go with research project. And it's something that I'm going to urge you to read. Basically, this podcast is going to make a degree of sense if you don't read it. But if you do read it and then come back and listen to the podcast, everything will just lock in much, much better. There's tons of detail. Not only detail about how the whole project has been carried out, but detail in terms of results, just like masses of data. And I'm going to link to it in the show notes. But if you want to go to Google, Google this, WordPress Page Builder Accessibility Comparison 2025, the numerals. And that will get you to equalizedigital.com/ all of that. And then just pause this podcast, go and check that out, and then come back. And honestly, you'll have a much better time with this podcast because you'll have understood what the heck we're talking about. Because lots of charts, and it's very hard in audio to explain charts. But okay, anyway, with that bit out of the way, Amber, will you just introduce yourself? And the reason I want you to do this particularly, I know it's boring, right? But why would somebody listen to you unless you were credible? Why would anybody want to know what's coming out of your mouth unless you have heritage doing this kind of accessibility work? And you do. So I want you to say it. So I know that's a boring first question, but there we go.
That's all right. So I'm Amber Hinds. I'm the CEO of a company called Equalize Digital, which focuses on WordPress accessibility. I've been working in the WordPress space since 2010 and with accessibility since 2014. So my company has an accessibility plugin called Accessibility Checker that does automated testing and fixing. We also are purely focused on accessibility. So we do audits and remediation. We do user testing with people with disabilities for clients, both in the WordPress space and outside of the WordPress space. Like right now, we have just wrapped up a project testing LibreChat, which is an open source AI chat platform, which is super fun. So we're all about accessibility on the web. Beyond that, I am a board member for the WordPress Accessibility Day nonprofit, which holds an annual conference once a year. I am the lead organizer for the WordPress Accessibility Meetup, and I participate in the core accessibility team.
Okay, and that is why I asked that question, because you just laid it all out, didn't you? You are entirely credible. You are the credible person, or at least one of many, but that's...
one. I don't know if I would say I'm the...
You're certainly one of the...
I will not take that claim.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay, I have a question related to that, and I'm curious. Again, it's not related to the topic at hand, but I am curious on a personal level. Why this niche? Why accessibility for you? What was the bit? I'm sure there's a backstory there. Maybe it's something personal that you don't wish to share, and if that's fine, we'll just move on. But is there a piece that you can explain why accessibility became the thing for you?
Well, I got introduced to accessibility just because of some of the clients that we had, particularly in higher education here in the US. They are required to have accessible websites. So that was my initial introduction to it. I personally have always felt like I want to be doing something that is very meaningful. I mentioned I'm on the board of a nonprofit. I've actually founded 2 other nonprofits and run them before handing them off to other people at different times in my life. I have volunteered for lots of nonprofits for a very long time. And so I think for me personally, as a business owner, I've always been sort of drawn to what can I do that feels important and like it gives positive benefit back to the world. I have 4 children, and when I'm not working, or when I'm working, I am not with my children. And so when I think about, well, what does that mean? What do I want the impact of that work to be and that time away from my children? I really want to know that it does something special. So I got introduced to accessibility, and I think what really flipped a switch for me was we had the first project that we ever said, okay, we're going to hire people who are blind to come in and test. So we had been doing accessibility for a while, and we had like people who were sighted that knew more about accessibility than us doing testing our work. But we had never actually said, we're going to go out and find users. And the first project that we brought users in to test was, it showed me a lot more about some of the nuance. And I always recommend this. If you have the opportunity to have users test your work and to just talk to someone and watch them navigate something you've built with a screen reader or some other alternative input device if they use something else, and then talk to them about that experience, it's really going to show you how important that is. And then through my work on the accessibility team, I became friends with a couple of people who are blind. And for me, it's just very much like, why shouldn't they have the same ability to buy things or order food or clothes or whatever that might be on the internet as me? Look up a menu for a restaurant. Like, they are people I love. And I don't know why we would say that that it's okay to just say, no, they can't do that. They're not in my demographic. I don't want their money.
I think
right? Like, so for me, it's moral, and it goes into this deeper, like, if I'm going to be working on something, let's work on something meaningful. And so I had, for a while, like, we became a certified B Corporation because I was so committed to this. I want our company to be more than just I'm trying to make money. And so I don't know. That's kind of how I got into it.
I think you've literally provided the perfect answer. You used the word twice, and it is the word, and it is the word meaningful. It's profoundly important. If you wander around so I'm going to describe the UK to you. If you wander around the UK in, let's say, the high street, you go into the high street, there are ramps, there are doors, there are buttons for those doors in appropriate places. People who, in other words, legislation happened a long time ago to make the physical world more accessible. It became criminal negligence to not provide physical access to people who might otherwise be unable to access those buildings. And now, of course, the whole world has moved online. The high street is sort of in decline, but everything's moving online. But we've got this problem that the buildings, if you like, websites, let's call, you can make the comparison there, a building and a website, it doesn't have the ramp. It doesn't have the button in the right place, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, we've got this whole new part of life, the internet, but the barriers are still up. The ramp doesn't exist, but the steps are there and so on. And you're right. It's meaningful work. It's like chiseling away and slowly trying to make the world more accessible. And I love that. I think you've captured that really, really beautifully. The word is meaningful. And I appreciate that you said that. That was music to my ears. Lovely. Thank you. So
thank you.
Let's move on to the topic at hand. Part of your, self-described remit, I guess. Nobody, I suppose, went out and forced you to do this. But for 2 years in a row, I think 2024 was the first time, 2025 is the second time, you've run this page builder accessibility comparison. And as I said at the top of the show, this is clearly a profoundly large amount of work. There's no way this is taking you a few hours. This is presumably days, weeks, maybe months, dare I say. Just run us through the length of time. Just that. How long did this study take you to do?
So it took over 200 hours, and it was actually 2 people's worth of work. So our accessibility specialist, Maria, did a lot of the initial testing. I did setup work, which I'm sure we'll dive into what all of that is in a minute. And then also came back and retested things, or she and I looked at things together if we weren't sure, like, how should we score this thing? And then obviously once we had all of the testing done, we had to draft the report. So it's over 200 hours. We started in June and we finished in August.
Yeah, so it is a laundry list of different ways in the WordPress space to create web pages, if you like. So just about every tool that you can imagine. And it's classified as page builders, but actually under the remit of this, as we may discover in a moment, are things like themes as well. But broadly speaking, the word page builder is used to describe anything, any technology in the WordPress space which can put pixels and words and images on pages, that kind of thing. And there's absolutely loads of them. And you've gone through this sort of ranking mechanism, and I'd like to unpick that. But I guess the initial question would be, why do you want to rank them against each other? Because, if you've got like a winner, it sort of feels like, oh, that's kind of weird. But then at the same time, if you don't have a winner, how the heck, you've got to call out the good to highlight the bad. I know that seems like a weird way of phrasing it, but unless somebody can be held up as this is great, look at the way they did this, then the people who haven't done that work don't really have have something to aim at. So this is more carrot than stick, I expect.
I mean, I hope so. I'm sure the people at the bottom don't feel like it. So why did we do it? It started with, because I run the meetup, people would send me messages and say, okay, what is the best theme or what is the best tool to use to build WordPress websites that will give me a good starting point? There are plenty of developers out there who build everything custom. But the reality of WordPress is that the vast majority of people, including very technical people, do not build everything custom. And the vast majority of people are choosing existing theme and block library collections or page builder tools to speed up their development process so that they can launch websites faster. And if these tools do not provide an accessible starting point, then no matter what they do, unless they're going to come in and write a bunch of JavaScript code or retemplate all of these tools, right? Like basically rebuild them or fix them themselves, then they are going to be building a website that has accessibility problems off the bat, regardless of if they've chosen the right colors and they've put headings in the right order and they put alt text on their images, because the underlying functionality of the components they've selected. And so people kept asking me this and I didn't know the answer. And so last year I said, I'm going to try and figure out the answer. So in 2024, I looked at 10. And then after releasing that report, we got a lot of, hey, can you also do? And so this year we looked at 19 plus Gutenberg.
Okay, so 20 in total.
Which is my baseline. Okay. But there's less testing for Gutenberg because there's less blocks and functionality in core WordPress than there is actually in these page building tools. So a lot of the things I looked at in the page building tools didn't exist.
If you keep up this
WordPress.
Doubling rate of of tools tested,
no.
Next year it'll be 40. No, let's not go there. So I can well understand that. Sorry,
I'll add more.
Carry on. I think I cross-talked you. Say that again.
Oh, that's good. I was just going to say I don't think that I will add more next year.
No. I mean, you've gone for all the popular ones. So basically, if you can think of a tool in the WordPress space, it's probably in there. There may be a few outliers that have not made it in there. But that's true, isn't it? Most page builders, the intention of that tool is to speed up the workflow. And as soon as you invoke the UI, whatever is in that UI is what you work with. And if you don't know about accessibility and the UI doesn't tell you, actually, there's extra work that you could be doing here, well, that's it, isn't it? It's game over. You've done what you needed to do. You publish the page and you move on and you do another one. So I suppose part of the survey here, part of the endeavor is to raise awareness. The ones at the top have been doing great work. The ones further down, maybe there's some intelligence that they can get from that. I'm curious to know if any of the well, actually don't tell me, but I would be curious to know, maybe you can tell me afterwards, if any of the ones that ended up further down the list actually do ever reach out and sort of say, okay, we hold our hands up, let's chat, because there's definitely work to be done.
I could answer that a little bit based on 2024, because there were several that did not do well in 2024 that did much better this year. And I know that they used our report. So like Bricks is an example that made major improvements, Beaver Builder as well. But Bricks, for example, in 2024, all of their accordions and their tab components were just built with divs. There were no buttons, which means they could not be focused with the keyboard and they could not be opened with the keyboard at all. They were only, you had to be able to use a mouse to use those components. And the Bricks team had fixed that by the time we did 2025. And they did reach out to me and they were like, they asked for clarification. And since the 2025 report went out, they asked for further clarification. So I know that there are companies in these reports that are taking them and using them to improve their
products. That's
amazing. And there are others. It's not just them.
And it's amazing the way that you've laid it out. So for a start, everything can be gained from one single sort of Google Docs spreadsheet. But you have to request access for that. But if you scroll down to the bottom of this survey, you'll see kind of table after table where every single builder is. So for example, like one of the tables is forms. And every single builder is pitted against the exact same criteria as every other one. And so, a company or a product where it's just green ticks all the way down, that's fine. That's probably, there's not a lot of work or any work to be done there. But any company working for the page builder where there's just a bunch of red crosses, you can see the bits which need improving. So you've actually, a consequence of this report is you have actually painted a really nice target for those companies to look at, and they can come to your survey and say, okay, we can do this. We obviously do that pretty well, but we haven't done this, and this. And I think what you'll discover if you go through this survey and you get to the bottom is there's an awful lot of red crosses, which means there's an awful lot of work to be done. There's a few high flyers, if you like, and we'll get to that towards the end. But there's an awful lot of work still to be done. So, okay. Let's get into the sort of methodology of it. You did it really recently. You carried out. So obviously, if this work had been done over an extended period of time, 6 to 8 months, the comparison wouldn't be all that fair. But you did it all during June and August 2025. So you've tried to capture it all in those 200 hours in that little bit of time. The website will show you the 19 page builders plus Gutenberg. They're all there to be listed. But what are some of the criteria in terms of how do you make sure that this is as fair, if you like, as possible? There's a lot here, but just unpack some of those bits, some of the top level items to ensure that the comparison was a fair one.
So this is something I did differently this year from last year. Last year when I was testing, I was testing alone. And I was just going for the fastest way I could get components on a page. So a lot of times these tools have, pick a theme and it'll spin it up with fake content and all that stuff. But what ended up happening was that I think caused a little bit more noise that I had to ignore because the content and the scenario was different on every website. So this time what I did was I made a WordPress multi-site, and actually if you request access to the data, you'll also get the link to that site so you can go look at all of these websites. So each subsite has the builder and it has identical content on it. As far as like the exact same pages, the exact same navigation menus, the exact same blog posts with images, and all of the starter content that I set up has zero accessibility problems. So even though these aren't real websites, I put alt text on the images. I did all of that so that we know, okay, we are starting from the exact same point in time. And it's all perfectly accessible with WordPress core. And then I am adding the builder. And then I went through on a components page and I put in the exact same components and I did my very best to configure them in the exact same way. So you were talking about forms. If there was a form in the plugin or a form builder in the plugin or tool, then I would try to have the exact same fields like name, company name, phone number, telephone, right? Yep. So that I was looking at as much of an apples to apples comparison as I could. And then with that, for each component, and that's what's nice about these tables and sheets is I was very granular. So it's not just something like tabs are accessible, right? It would say like the tab controls are a button or can be triggered with the spacebar. And then there's a separate check that says, the tab container has a tab list role. The tabs have a tab role. The tab panels have a tab panel role, right? Yep. Each of these are individual checks. So they might pass one, but not the other. And so I tried to be very granular in that way. And as much as possible, we tried to give them a straight pass or fail. In every check was something where you either got it or you didn't. Like there was no black and white. There are a few instances, though, where I did give them this in the middle ground kind of concern. It's like technically it passes, but there's something about it that we feel like might cause users to either enter the content in a wrong way so that it would fail, or it's very difficult to achieve, or there was something else that just seemed potentially problematic to us. And on the full Google spreadsheet has explanations for all of them.
Let me just read that back to you to make sure I've fully understood. Yeah. So there's a multi-site network which we can have access to the front end of each of those if we request it. So you can see what all the builders are doing. And in order to improve on 2024's version of the survey, you've mapped the exact same navigation, so the same amount of pages with, where possible, the exact same content. The content that you pulled in is pre-vetted to be accessible. So if you were to examine it without invoking you use the word components, and so for that I'm imagining the bits and pieces that make up the page builder. The bits that you can drag in from the sidebar, the paragraphs and the sliders and the headings and images and all of those different components that you can add in. Pre that, they were all on a level playing field. Everybody got the same, and then you started to use their components to build up the bits and pieces. Am I right so far? Yep, okay.
Pretty much.
And then further to that, I think you didn't use any kind of like third party. So there's a whole ecosystem, let's say, for example, around Elementor, which is giant page builder, millions and millions of websites. This whole third party ecosystem of things that you can drop in, many of them probably tackling accessibility. I don't really know, but you didn't use any of those. It was just the core product. But in every case, I think also it was the pro core product. If they had a paid for version, you somehow came by that, paid for it, got it off a client, what have you, and you used the pro version without any third parties. Again, have I got that about right?
That is correct. Okay. So it was, most of them were pro, and yeah, sometimes we already had it. Sometimes we borrowed it from someone. Sometimes we went to the builder and the builder gave it to us for free. There's a few, including some that didn't do very well, but when I reached out and I said, hey, we want to include you this year, they said, yes, we would love this feedback. And one afterwards, when I sent him the report, he said, I knew we weren't going to do well.
Oh.
So because you get nervous and I'm like, they gave me this thing for free to test. And then I'm going to probably be like, it sucks.
Well, you gave them a free accessibility check. I suppose that's one way of...
But exactly. They got a free accessibility audit out of it, which is quite valuable. But yes, no third-party components. And this came up a little bit like with Bricks last year when I mentioned their tabs and accordions weren't functional. And a bunch of people in the Bricks community was like, yeah, but nobody uses Bricks accordions. They use some XYZ plugin that is way better. And I was like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. Bricks should be making things that function, and whatever builder should be making things that function. Baseline, you shouldn't have to add extra. And it's the same thing with Divi. Divi always does very poorly. And there are 3 or 4 different add-on plugins for Divi that will fix accessibility problems in Divi. They have some incredibly significant, but also very easy to fix problems, like no focus outlines when you tab through the page. But I don't think that Divi score should get to go up if I go add a third-party plugin to make it accessible.
No, that seems like...
Because Divi, you shouldn't have to pay extra to add accessibility to your...
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, right, we've laid the groundworks there. And then you've got this thing which... Okay, just to give you an idea of just how in-depth this is, it's not like there's just one criteria for each of these things. There's, in many cases, multiple dozens of things. So as an example, let's just read the first one into the record. So this is the navigation accessibility. The things that were tested were uses the nav tag, nav tag is labeled. Users can define the nav tag, ARIA label, drop-downs keyboard accessible, separate buttons for opening and closing drop-downs, call to action button styles achievable in primary navigation without requiring custom CSS. I'm going to go on. Visible keyboard focus, mobile menu is keyboard accessible, works on Zoom, and that's where that one ends. But that's just the builder navigation accessibility. And then for each of the other ones, of which there's many, there's that plus in many cases significantly more than that. So every single, it's not like this is one size fits all. Oh, navigation pass fail. No. It's like this bit of navigation, this bit of navigation, this bit of navigation. And then you give them all, it's pretty binary. It's pass, fail. And then I can't remember, you had two more. Concern
and not applicable.
Okay, so there's an NA, it's not available there, but then there's a pass, a fail, and a concern. Is the concern one the kind of like the intermediate, I'm not sure what to do thing? What's the concern one?
That's what I was talking about earlier, where for a concern, mostly passes.
Right.
But there's something, and it's a little different on how it was, how they were rated or why they were given a concern based on what the test was in the component or something like that. In the Google Sheet, they're all explained.
Okay, right, yeah.
So that would be what I would recommend is get access to the Google Sheet. We couldn't put it on the web page just because, these tables already sideways scroll, which I really hate.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But it's too much information to put on a web page.
Okay, so all of these scores accrue, and every pass gets a singular point. So this is kind of interesting. So there's no weighting to any particular thing. Now that's curious because I guess for ease of use, you've got to go for something like that. But I also imagine that some things are way more important than other things. Some peculiar little thing that you're testing for. If it's a fail, it's a no point. If it's a pass, it's a 1 point, which might equal something that is just so self-evidently worth more than 1 point. Why did you go for that methodology? That's curious.
So I think initially the way I was thinking about it is we score them, we total up all of their passes, and then we get a percent passing of all the things that were applicable. So if something's not applicable because they don't have that component, then obviously we're not taking points away from it. And my thought was, I just want to know who does everything perfectly, or when they build something, it is perfect, right? So the highest of pass, just looking at passes would tell me it is perfect. Now, that said, I've thought a little bit more about this, and I think next year we might try and do more weighting. One of the things that we could do a little differently, and this became more apparent when we added more builders, because there's a middle section where a whole bunch of builders are only separated by 1 percentage point.
Yeah.
Or in one case, it's less than a whole percentage point. And they're ranked in that way. But if I had weighting, we might have a better understanding. It's possible one that was down low would actually move up. Because they might have done better at some of the more serious issues. So I think, next year I might rethink that. It makes my Google spreadsheet have to have way more complex formula logic, which I might have to ask my partner, Chris, to help me with, because
honestly, I don't think there's
there's
definitely no perfect way of scoring this, but I think that's a really decent place to put your flag in the sand. Everything gets a point, and, some things will definitely be skewed, but they're skewed for everybody, right? Everybody gets the same skewing, so it's fine.
They get the same skew.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do think I definitely can make the concern be a half point next year. That will be really easy for me to do. What will be more complicated is if I go through each item tested and assign a severity rate. I think I know how I can do that if I were to add a column, so I can calculate against
do you have had thoughts about the scoring for things like how straightforward it is? So, for example, if a particular plugin makes the I don't know, let's say there's some ARIA label or something like that. It surfaces that and gives that real priority. It's easy to find in the interface. It's not buried within a menu, within a menu, within a menu. In other words, it's there, but heck, nobody's going to find it. I did wonder if any of that is sort of incorporated into it. Like, okay, you've got it, but boy, is it hard to use with your particular page. But I didn't know if any of that might be creeping in at some point.
So that is some of the concerns, were things like that. Like talking about forms, there was one, and I don't know if I'll remember off the top of my head, but there was one where the way you added the labels to fields, you actually had to add a separate component. So it wasn't like most form builders, when you put a field in the page, there's like a thing where you fill in and you say what the label for the field name is. But in this one, you had to put in the input, and then you also had to insert a label element. You had to know to do that. And also, I think we called out that their documentation says this is optional, which is not true.
Okay, yeah.
It is not optional to label your field, but they're all like, you could just use the placeholder instead.
Okay.
Like,
okay, so some of that, right.
So technically, it was possible for all of the fields to be labeled, but because of their documentation and the way they were built, we gave them a concern, because I'm like, they're basically making people think you don't need to do this.
So let's move on to the components that you tested. So obviously, Page Builder A is going to ship with a different set of components to Page Builder B, but certainly what I'm looking at the moment, the following things were tested. Navigation, header, search, accordion, carousel or slider. That's an interesting one. I bet that was fun. Forms, icon list, loop, post, block, tabs, and testimonial. So a fairly constrained list of things. I imagine a lot of these page builders also have a myriad arrangement of other, but they're kind of, they represent the basics of what I imagine most of them would have. How did you come about deciding on those then? Was it simply that they were ubiquitous? They were pretty much a straightforward bet that each one of them would have those? So
it's more about what components do I most commonly see on professional business websites.
Yeah.
And so, we had been building websites for like 10 years, right? More than 10 years at this point. And it was kind of like, what did we always need? Well, we always had accordions. Yeah. We always had tabs. We didn't always have carousels, but the weird thing is people like them. And so it was like, okay, I got to test that. Last year, I didn't include forms. And I didn't include forms because I personally feel pretty strongly that you should just use a form plugin, because your form plugin is going to do better than any page builder at giving you all the options that you need to build amazing forms that do really cool things. But I added forms this year because a lot of these tools, now that they've introduced or added forms and they have these starter templates, well, of course, they're putting the form on the contact page. And the reality is if a non-technical user is, for example, taking Elementor, using an Elementor theme kit to get started on their website, then just going through and changing content, well, hey, there's already a contact form on the contact page. Why would they? Yeah. Like, if you're a non-technical person who doesn't understand, why would you be like, oh, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to go buy a form plugin or find a free form plugin, right? Like, you're just going to be like, oh, it's already here. And it's already asking for all the things I want, like their name and email address and phone number and the message they were going to send me. So I'm just going to use it.
A lot of it.
So I realized that as much as I don't want page builders to have forms, I had to test them, because the reality is that what's going to stay on websites.
The templates, and increasingly, I'm sure we could have a whole other episode about this, the increasing use of AI to create sort of boilerplate websites as well. They often drop in, the form solution that comes with this particular page builder, and it, it's there, it looks fine. I asked for a contact page, so I got a contact page. There it is, and it'll probably function. And given that that's what's happening,
maybe that is one of those ones too, especially where, like I'll say this, Spectra blocks, it looks like those are labeled fields, but they don't actually use a label tag. And so all of the fields in that form are totally not labeled. But unless you're somebody who truly understands HTML or accessibility, like, it looks labeled and you've given it a label on the back end. And so this kind of goes back to my whole, like, I need to add this because I also want page builders to feel a little bit of pressure I need to fix this issue that is really a major critical blocker for people with disabilities. because a lot of non-technical people aren't going to know that it's a problem.
So also the another thing that you were testing for, so that we just described the components that you used, the ones that I just mentioned, but also there's a section here called accessibility ready requirements. And I'm just going to read the paragraph because I confess I'm not really sure what this is. We also tested for, and this is underlined, so it must be a link, I'm guessing, WordPress accessibility ready requirements. I'll put that in the show notes so you can follow up with that. Following the new process soon to be introduced on WordPress.org, this includes looking at many parts of the site controlled by the theme and assessing, and then I'll just do the top 3 or 4 here. Skip to content links, landmark roles and names, keyboard navigation support, controls with accessible names, roles and states, and then there's about another dozen more. What is that part? That didn't, I didn't kind of make the mental connection there. What's that bit?
On WordPress.org, if you go to the themes section, there is a filter where you can filter the free themes that are available as accessibility ready.
Thank you.
And the accessibility ready tag on WordPress.org is not one that a theme is supposed to just apply. Like, they can give any other tag that they want to show up in the theme directory. But that one, you actually have to request permission to use the tag. And when you request permission, someone on the accessibility team actually does a manual audit of your theme for specific requirements. The accessibility ready requirements have been in the process of being updated. I will fully admit that I am the delay on publishing them.
I wonder why.
One on,
It's not like you're busy or
on
anything.
WordPress.org. But they should be out very soon. But yeah, that's what this is those have gone back to 2014. Joe Dolson wrote the original ones. And then over the last year, he and I and myriad of amazing human beings who came to accessibility tables at various WordCamps, WordCamp US, WordCamp Canada, 2 WordCamp Europes, have looked at them and helped us to create new guidelines. And I've been overhauling the testing process to make it easier for anyone to do so that theme developers can also test their own stuff more easily and know what they're supposed to do. So I use the new testing process that we are going to publish very soon on WordPress.org to also test the builders. And what we haven't said yet is that these builders, sometimes they are a theme, but a lot of times they're a plugin. And so when we set up the website, we also installed a companion theme if one was available. So for example, Elementor was tested with Hello.
Okay.
So they were only scored if the theme on the website was one that the company could control. So there's a few where we kept them with 2025. Right. And if there were elements coming out of 2025, they didn't get a pass if it passed. They also didn't get a fail if it failed, right? Like we would just say, okay, well, that's ignored because they literally didn't have a theme. WP Bakery would be one like that. It's a plugin only. They don't offer a theme. They say you can use it with any theme.
Right. So
so that's why we did the theme tests, because they were themes that were made by the same company and are promoted as you should use this with our builder.
Got it. Okay. So in the case of, I don't know, let's say Beaver Builder, it has a theme. Presumably because it's got a theme, it's going to benefit from some aspect of the work that's been done on that theme. But if there's no theme, then you go for a default WordPress theme, 2025 in this case. Got it. Okay. Again, that makes sense. Right. Yes. Now to the results. Now, this is going to take me a little while, but I'm going to do it because I think it's important. I'm going to go through the list of all the tables just because I'm just going to read what the table's title is, and then you can go through and explore. So the first one is Page Builder Navigation Accessibility. That is followed by Page Builder Header Search Accessibility. Then Page Builder Accordion Accessibility, and I'm going to stop saying Page Builder. Carousel Sliders Accessibility, Form Accessibility. Then we've got Icon List Accessibility, Loop Posts Block Accessibility, Tabs Accessibility, Testimonials. I'll stop saying accessibility at the end as well. Skip Links, Landmark, Keyboard Navigation, Names, Accessible Names, Roles and States, Form field labels, heading structure, link underlines, link text, default color contrast, image accessibility, animations, reflow, that's an interesting one, context change accessibility, new link tab warnings, hover focus content accessibility, and that's it, I think. I think I've got through them all. So there's a lot. There's absolutely tons. And each one of those represents its own table with, in many cases, dozens of different tests going on. So I don't know how many data points you've got here. You could be into the multiple thousands. But at the end, as described, out pops out a score. This is the moment of truth. Who won? Who came out on top?
So Cadence came out on top with both the Cadence theme and Cadence block, and they got a 100% score. Now we can say, and I have this note on here as well, that Cadence and their parent company, Liquid Web, has been working with us for more than a year to make all of their WordPress plugins more accessible. And the Liquid Web website we did auditing for, they're very committed to accessibility over there. So they have been putting effort in. They didn't get a 100% last year, but they did get a 100% this year.
So, okay, that's a fair enough caveat, and I think it would be remiss of you not to mention it. But also, they employed an expert because they wanted to improve their product, and it's not entirely. I mean, that's just what you'd hope, right? You'd hope that it would certainly go north. And so Cadence came out with 100%. I guess, like I said, that's to be expected. I'll just go through the top few. So first, Cadence, 100%. Then it was Generate Blocks and Generate Press. So those two things combined. Then Grade, which I think I know as Grade Suite, Greyd. Followed by Elementor, followed by Green Shift, Beaver Builder, Breakdance, Bricks, Site Origin Page Builder. And then in 10th place, Astra Spectra. And then we go from 11 to 19, and I won't actually go through all of those. So when you say that Cadence came out with 100% with all the caveats that you mentioned there, is it like, are you basically saying that Cadence is literally perfect? Or is it just it managed to surpass everything on your test? I don't quite know what that question means, but are there things that, if you'd widened the search, you could have disrupted on all of them? It wouldn't be like Cadence is 100% all the time, forever and ever, amen.
So what is important to understand about this report is it is not a comprehensive accessibility audit of every component in these tools. There, as you mentioned earlier, we looked at maybe, 8 or 10 different blocks or widgets, whatever the builder calls them. But many of these have 25, 30 blocks or widgets built into them.
Yeah, right.
So would the numbers change if we looked at everything? Oh yeah, for sure. I think this order would definitely change if we expanded scope. The other thing that we didn't look at is the admin or the editor experience, which I know to some degree can be a little frustrating to some of our friends who are blind and use WordPress, because this is only a front-end audit.
That's a whole other survey, Amber. Oh, no.
Yes. No. If I were going to do a back-end audit to tell you, if you're a blind person and you want to choose one of these tools, what is going to be the easiest for you to use, that would be a whole different test, and it might have very different results. Now, I will say I have a couple of blind friends who use Cadence, so I think Cadence is usable in the admin as well, but I haven't fully tested it, so I can't speak to, like that. I would say any of them that are block-based are probably going to have a more accessible admin.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah.
Than the ones that have created their own editor experience. That's not guaranteed, because of course, if they've built their own editor experience, they can have done a lot of accessibility testing as part of their editor building process. But I think it's probably less likely, whereas anything that relies on the core builder is going to benefit from all of the work that folks like Joe Dolson and Andrea and Alex Stein and some other people have done in core accessibility.
You
So
made like a broad...
that's something.
Yeah,
to
thank
consider.
you. You kind of encapsulated it somewhere on the page here. And although, again, you can't map this to everything, it kind of boils down to, if it's newer, it has a higher likelihood of scoring higher. There's a whole lot of legacy.
That's what it seemed like.
Is that about right? I mean...
A lot of the... Yeah, I mean, so like Divi is pretty old and they were third from the bottom. They have a legacy code base that they're dealing with. I know I actually opened an issue for WordPress core and I about the add media button that shows up if you're in the classic editor or, you know, some other scenarios right above the editor itself, that little add media button. And I opened an issue last week and I was like, hey, this doesn't have ARIA. It has pop-up dialogue to tell a blind person that it's going to open a modal. And Joe, like, everybody's like, okay, when was the problem added? So he's like going back and he like, I don't know why. I guess it's important. So he's like tagged, okay, here's the issue when this became a button, because it used to be like a link or something coded not properly. They fixed it to be a button. And he's like, I don't actually think ARIA has pop-up existed when this was made into a button. Right?
Yeah.
Like the spec, the HTML, the ARIA, like the building bones that we use to code things also evolves and changes. And so an older tool, if they're not paying attention and they're not evolving their tools, then they could have a lot more problems, because it's possible they might have been built before some of this ARIA spec even existed.
And I suppose that sort of is a neat segue with the things that you do at Equalize Digital. You know, again, forgive me for sort of saying this on your behalf, but I'm guessing that the reason that tools like Cadence did do very well is because they have hired somebody who's made it their mission in life to understand this stuff. And it's not everybody's mission in life. You know, if you're a software developer, if you're building a page builder, your job might be just to get the page builder out of the door and market it and what have you, and be successful at shifting units of that product and not necessarily thinking about these bits and pieces. And so, you know, I can understand there's a connection there. So with that, I'm going to recommend that if you're a page builder of a page builder, why not get in touch with Amber and Equalize Digital, and there may very well be work. Maybe they are all already doing that, I would have thought anyway. But the other thing to mention, of course, is that just because your page builder or thing of choice came high on this survey, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to build a perfect website. That then still needs a fair level of expertise and understanding how the tool implements things and accessibility rules and stipulations and guidelines in more general detail. So that's an interesting point to mention as well. Just because it scores highly here doesn't mean you're going to deploy a perfect site because you use that tool, I guess is worth mentioning.
Yeah, the best way I would say that is you want to think about these tools as their percent of accessibility readiness. It's the same thing as themes on WordPress.org. We don't say that they're accessible themes. We say that they are accessibility ready, meaning they're not likely to add problems for those specific things, but you as a site owner or developer still have to keep things in mind. Yeah. You have to choose colors for color contrast. You need to enter your content in an accessible manner. You need to, spend time thinking about how people are going to interact with the website and what the UI needs to be. And even if you choose the most accessible stack of plugins, if the content is going in poorly, then it won't matter. You could still have a very inaccessible website.
Yeah, thank you. And we are in the era where accessibility is not just a moral compulsion, it's also increasingly a legal compulsion. Over in the part of the world where I live, we've got the European Accessibility Act, and I think in the part of the world where you are, there's legislation which I don't know if it has an equal clout, but over here there's quite a lot of teeth behind the European Accessibility Act as well. So very important work to be done. Mm-hmm. I think probably at 50 minutes, we've probably reached the sweet spot of where we need to get to. Hopefully, dear listener, the idea of this is that you go to the website. The link will be in the show notes. If you go to wpbuilds.com/. search for the episode with Amber Hinds on it. I can't at the minute say what number that will be, but you go and search for the episode with Amber Hinds in. And hopefully you will then open up this wonderful document, which is a real labour of love, and go and explore, see all of the criteria, and make your own conclusions and, purchase accordingly. So unless there's anything else you want to... Oh, actually, yeah, why not? Let's just offer up, where can we find you? Whether that's a URL or a contact form or an email address or whatever.
So on social media, I am most active on X, and you can find me there at Hey Amber Hinds. Otherwise, our website, of course, is equalizedigital.com, and there is a contact form that you can use there as well.
Thank you very much. Well, Amber, it's been a pleasure chatting to you today. Thank you for explaining all of that, but also thank you for doing it. Necessary work, and I'm very appreciative. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, that's all we've got for you this week. Very nice to have you with us. I hope that you enjoyed that chat with Amber. If you did, head to wpbuilds.com, search for episode number 440, and we would love it if you leave us a comment there. That would be so nice. We love the WordPress commenting system, and it would be really nice to have your opinions on this particular subject. In this case, the WordPress page builder accessibility study. Very interesting conversation indeed. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by GoDaddy Pro. GoDaddy Pro, the home of managed WordPress hosting that includes free domain, SSL, and 24/7 support. Bundle that with The Hub by GoDaddy Pro to unlock more free benefits to manage multiple sites in one place. Invoice clients and get 30% off new purchases. Find out more at go.me/WP Builds. We're also helped out by Bluehost. Bluehost, redefine your web hosting experience with Bluehost Cloud. Managed WordPress hosting that comes with lightning-fast websites, 100% network uptime, and 24/7 priority support. With Bluehost Cloud, the possibilities are out of this world. Experience it today at bluehost.com/cloud. We're also joined by Omnisend. Omnisend, do you sell your stuff online? Then meet Omnisend. Yes, that Omnisend. The email and SMS tool that helped you make $73 for every dollar spent. The one that's so good, it's almost boring. Hate the excitement of roller coaster sales? Prefer a steady line going up? Try Omnisend today at omnisend.com. And we do thank GoDaddy Pro, Bluehost, and Omnisend for their support of the WP Builds podcast. Okay, that really is truly almost all we've got time for. Just a quick shout out. If you want to follow us, wpbuilds.com/subscribe. If you would like to advertise, that's wpbuilds.com/advertise. And of course, increasingly in the next few weeks, we'll be making this call. Head to wpbuilds.com/black to find out more Black Friday deals all in one place and add your product or service as well. Okay, I'm going to fade in some very, very cheesy music and say stay safe, have a good week. Bye-bye for now.